Warning, the video you're about to watch contains mathematics at the level of college algebra and trigonometry. All material has an assumed prerequisite of both Algebra 1, which is elementary algebra, and Algebra 2, which is intermediate algebra. While some prerequisite topics are reviewed briefly, a more thorough review of these entrance topics can be found by searching the web.
It's the system of equations. We must deal with them all at once. Always looking for solutions. Positive outlook overcome.
Hello, my name is Roy Simpson, professor of mathematics at Cosumnes River College in Sacramento, California. This video is dedicated to a review for college algebra, and we're just going to cover the vertical line test in this video. This is all about functions. You should have already seen the vertical line test, so it shouldn't be anything new to you. I'm just going to quickly talk about it, give an example, and we'll be done with this video. So the vertical line test states the following. If any vertical line intersects the graph of a relation more than once, then the relation is not a function. So let's just draw out a relation between x and y. There are an infinite number of possibilities, but let's pretend that this is the relation between x and y. It just graphs out some type of weird looking ellipse. Well, if I can draw a vertical line and it hits this more than once, it's not a function, and that's what the vertical line test says. But why is that the case? Well, if you plug in a value of x, let's say this is x equals 1, and it strikes the curve more than once, that means that x equals 1 has two possible y values that it will return when you plug in 1 to the relation. And that means that it can't be a function, right? Because 1, the input, can't lead to two different outputs for functions. So if it were a function, a true function, 1 could only lead to one output, not both 3 and 5. So that's why the vertical line test is what it is. There are a couple key words here. If any vertical line, and then more than once. For example, if I had a function, I should say a relation, and the relation looked like this when graphed. If I start drawing vertical lines, no matter where I draw them, they will only strike the curve at most once. In other words, they will not strike the curve more than once. And notice way off to the left here, this guy doesn't even strike the curve, but that's okay. The main thing we need to know is that our vertical line cannot strike the curve more than once. It's okay if it doesn't strike the curve at all, or it strikes the curve only once. What's not okay is if it strikes the curve more than once. Once we have a vertical line that strikes the curve more than once, we know the curve we've been handed does not represent a function. However, this one totally represents a function because any vertical line I draw will only hit the curve at most once. Now, the proof of the vertical line test is actually not too bad. So we're going to start with the supposition. Suppose that somebody's just given us the graph of a relation. So relation between x and y. So if there exists a vertical line, and we'll just call that vertical line x equals k, that's the equation of a vertical line, k is just where that vertical line exists. Suppose there exists a vertical line, or if there exists a vertical line at x equals k, which intersects the graph more than once, say at k comma y sub 1 and k comma y sub 2, where y sub 1 and y sub 2 are not the same, then the input, x equals k, leads to two different outputs, specifically y1 and y2. And therefore, the relation is not a function. That's just by definition. Remember, to be a function, that input of k can only lead to one output. But because we're saying if there is a vertical line, x equals k, that strikes the curve more than once, then you have these two different outputs associated with the single input of k, and therefore it cannot be a function. There we go. If any vertical line intersects the graph of a relation more than once, the relation is not a function. QED, quod erat demonstratum, so it has been demonstrated. That's the end of the proof. So let's go ahead and use the vertical line test, which we often call the VLT, to show that the graph from example 3.1 number 6 represents a function. Well, I have to find that example. And actually, I think it's this example, it's just numbered incorrectly, but We want to showcase this represents a function. Well, given any vertical line that I want to draw, let me go ahead and just draw some vertical lines here. Actually, I don't even need to draw them. If I place this vertical ruler anywhere, notice it will only intersect the curve once. No matter where I place it, it intersects the curve only once, at most once. In other words, it will not strike the curve more than once. So this is definitely a function because it passes the vertical line test. Again, if you're handed a curve like, let's say this, that will not pass the vertical line test. And so that curve or that relation is not a function at all. Anyhow, the vertical line test is a very fast test to determine if a graph represents a function. Honestly, most people get it pretty quickly. So in the next video, we'll actually talk about the horizontal line test, and that'll round out all of our review on functions for college algebra.
It's the system of equations. We must deal with them all at once. Always looking for solutions. Positive outlook overcomes obstacles getting in our way. Cause affects more than we can sometimes see. Things for what they are and work together until you feel at peace. Just listen close. Don't talk too much that isn't kosher. You may really hurt inside. It doesn't justify you to speak too loud and cry.